Welcome to Season 2 of Voices of Value, a conversation between Peter Kakos and Rick Rushton, and their high-achieving guests from professional sport, Olympians, business leaders, and ordinary people with value hacks to share through simple life lessons. If you're keen to reach your next level personally and professionally, sit back and join the conversation with your hosts, Rick and Peter.
Welcome to Voices of Value with my good friend Peter Kakos. Rick Rushton here. Pete, a big week in AFL circles. It's AFL Grand Final week, and neither your side nor my side are actually participating, but it doesn't mean we can't just get into the AFL spirit.
Look, absolutely, and it doesn't mean we can just gloss over the fact of what happened on Saturday night either, Rick.
Okay, thank you.
You've been up and about during the finals,
I have.
And
Yep.
Let's just say that Saturday night didn't go to plan.
No, you don't win them on paper. That's what I've learnt, and certainly not on Saturday night, because if it was on paper, it would have been mulch by the end. It was just so wet. But anyway, no, it didn't go that well.
Was that the first excuse?
That's it. Yeah, the weather.
No, we won't go too much into it,
thank
but
you. I felt the
like
love
now,
there.
but we will throughout the
no doubt,
course of it,
you'll just
because we've
keep
got
on.
some absolute AFL royalty with us. Elite sports people is who we love, and I can think of no one better to share grand final week with us here at Voices of Value than this gentleman to my right.
Yeah, and
Your left.
the people's champion, let's be candid. You know, Bob Murphy is a name that's synonymous with the AFL. It's around this time of the year too, if we remember not that long ago, when the Western Bulldogs finally saluted after a very long drought in an AFL premiership, which we want to touch on because this man was a little bit of part of controversy based on how it all went in relation to the celebrations. But, you know, for those who do follow AFL, and we are very AFL-centric this time of the year, yeah, Bob Murphy played over 300 excellent games, and I think you're going to do a much better introduction than me. He's just a friend. You can sort of do it from the standpoint of your research, Pete.
Well, 312 games and a veteran of the Western Bulldogs. He was picked up in 99 at pick 13.
Unlucky for some.
Yeah, unlucky for some, but it was certainly very lucky for you because it was such a stellar career. But I'm looking forward to tapping into a lot of things today because one being probably the single most heartfelt moment ever on a sporting field, I think, happened to Bob Murphy, and it wasn't actually in the act of play at all. So we'll get to that particular moment, but certainly want to tap into the leadership side of Bob Murphy and the elite athlete that you were, and you know you're still only 37 years of age, which is quite phenomenal. You're still a very, very young man. And still, you know, so much to give in the football circles. Maybe not so much on the arena now, but I don't know. Could
Come back.
No,
no.
you were right the first time.
He's a spent force. Bob, welcome to Voices of Value, and thanks for the gift of your time in what is a busy week for you because you're on the air. You're an
Yes.
expert on SEN. You're on Fox Footy.
There's a lot of
going on
loose
there.
language on this podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
There's football royalty we got thrown in there. Now we've got the expert.
Expert. Yep, that's how we roll.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. It's an honour to sit with you two fine gentlemen.
So there's a fun story about how we first met, Pete, but I got asked to do a talk at the Western Bulldogs by then incumbent coach Peter Rode, who was a bit of a bit of a holding pattern at the end of one season and then got the gig later on. That's something that's happened a lot this year in the AFL, as we know, with Brett Ratton and obviously with Reece Shaw. And, you know, clearly that was an interesting time to go at the Western Bulldogs. I was told two things. Number one, we're a developing list. Number two, we've got no money. So
Yeah.
can you come down and share some stuff with us? And luckily I said yes to both those things because I got to meet this great man to my left, your right. But introduce him the way you want to cover what we want to cover today, I think. Is the
Yeah, look, I certainly, as I said, tap into the mind. 20 years at elite level in arguably one of the number one sport in Australia. So certainly want to hear about that. But we're very big here, Bob, on at Voices of Value in terms of the life hacks and particularly leadership sort of point of views and how do you go about leading and so forth. And also, how do you go about, you know, as an elite athlete, how do you set yourself up and, you know, get the mind right and so forth. So there's so many things that I'm looking forward to discussing with you today. But if we went back further for when you first, you know, drafted obviously in 99, as a kid growing up, can you talk a little bit about that part of the life and journey?
My childhood, I sort of describe it as a boulevard of green lights. There was nothing to push back on. I came from a happy home. Mum and Dad were very much in love. There was no angst in the house. I was part of, grew up in the grunge generation of an angsty, and I had zero angst. I was just a very happy, carefree kid, loved playing any sort of sport, chasing the ball. It was a very sort of pure existence. And, becoming an AFL football, that was what I'd sort of set my mind to. And I assumed it would happen. I sort of look back now a bit sort of sheepishly of just the naivety around. It wasn't I want to do that. It was I will do that. I'll just do that. That's what I want to do. And then it happened. And it's only the older you get that realise that luck and all a number of things fall your way to get the chance. But it was a thrill. Your life. To be drafted was like getting the golden ticket in Charlie Bucket. That's how it sort of felt to me. So the footy career wasn't easy. The childhood, the growing up, that part was a boulevard of green lights. Or the footy that had a few bumps along the trail.
Was there some natural ability, or was it a lot of hard work? What was it?
There was hard work, but I had a natural, I had a knack for the game. I had a knack for sport and I had a confidence with that I thought I could mix it. And I thought I could play, sort of thing.
Must be something about that part of the world where you grew up in down in Warragul.
Yeah, that's right.
We had Trent Houghton on our last episode, and you grew up
a bit of a hero of mine, Trent Houghton.
Yeah,
because league footballers, in my mind they were superheroes, and generally they didn't come from Warragul, but Trent Houghton was, his mum and my mum taught together at, that on staff at the Marasine College, and Trent playing in the AFL was, it made it real for me. So Trent's kind of an important sort of figure in my early years.
So you get to the Doggies and you're playing under Plough and you're just enjoying the reign of being a young, fresh footballer. First game, first goal, Optus Oval now.
Yeah.
I think, what's it called? Icon Park?
Yeah, Icon Park. I was there.
Princess Park, probably.
Princess Park.
Whatever it was. You remember it vividly?
Remember that day vividly. Yeah, it's the best way I can describe that, because I was a footy mad kid that playing on Princess Park, so the suburban ground's still alive, but it was a bit like stepping into the television. That's how it felt. It felt like sort of walking into the television and this world sort of becoming all around you. And I remember there was at one stage a fight broke out between Tony Liberatore and Aaron Hamill, and they were trying to claw at each other, and everyone was sort of trying to get them away from each other. It was sort of chaos. It was a melee. and I was in the middle of it, but I was like a rock in the middle of the stream. Everything sort of just moved around me. I was sort of politely ignored.
Was that because of your big bulky sort of
physique?
Yeah, I think
that, it was like the adults were sorting things out and the children were sort of brushed aside.
Yeah.
There would have been a bit of pressure on you. Picked up at number 13, I believe there were some pretty big statements made about Robert Murphy and
Scotty Clayton famously saying we'll win 2. Yeah, no pressure there. Win 2 Brownlow medals.
Didn't quite deliver on that front.
No, but Scotty Clayton was a good judge. Put together some pretty powerful lists when you really stop and think about his career, and other than the Gold Coast Suns, but that's a story for another time. But he did sort of signal your talent from a long way out. So you were on the radar. It's not like you could have just slipped into a comfortable AFL career.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily feel the pressure of it though. It was just a magic ride. It was because I'd gone from being I was a draft. I was young, so I had another year. So I was already young. So it was all sort of upside, and then I went from a draft smoky. Then you get picked, and life just picks up pace. So I wasn't really thinking it in terms of there's a bit of pressure. It was like, I've got the dream gig here.
Mm. You've got a tremendous attitude, and it's something that's certainly been prevalent through your whole career, and listening to you now on the radio and so forth. You've just got such a innate ability to describe what's happening and in the footy world. Leadership is where I want to go with this. And, at what stage do you think at the Bulldogs were you earmarked as a leader, or did you feel yourself, I could potentially lead this team one day?
Those thoughts they came much later. So I suppose I was maybe sort of, how would you describe it? Like I was sort of funneled into the leadership of the time, but I sort of thought at the time that leadership in football at the time was pretty conservative, and I was in footy terms a bit out there, which is not that hard to be sort of cast in footy. It was so conservative. But the actual formal leadership of wanting to be captain, or that was never the burning ambition for me. I felt like I had a certain style and brought something in that space. But it wasn't until the end of 2014 when the captain left, and then the coach was sacked a couple of days later, that I had the urge to, now I need to be the captain, and I was very definitive. Whereas usually I could sort of a bit grey and sort of see both sides and a bit of doubt there, and I had zero doubt. It's like, I'm now the situation that the club's in right now, which is a dire one. I'm the person that needs to take that leadership role.
And I remember that conversation well, because you when we spoke about it, you said, Griff's walked out, the coach, Brendan McCartney's fallen on his sword. The other thing you missed there, which I'm sure you won't mind sharing, one of your very, very good friends, close friends, groomsman at your wedding, CEO of the club, has also moved on. So it's just disarray, and it's almost like we're an absolute joke. And you felt compelled to step in there at that stage then to offer up leadership, if memory serves.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I felt a deep sense of, I would describe it as shame, that I think I was the oldest player on the list at the time, and the captain walks away and the coach is gone, and then the CEO's gone. Like, you have to take your share of responsibility. It's on your watch, and the club. You really, if you should have an attitude of the club should be better after you've left it. And I was 32 and thought, well, not only is it not better, this is probably as low as it can get for a footy club right now. So I felt a deep sense of sort of shame and responsibility for that. And then it was, okay, well, whatever time I've got left as a player, I want to put everything into getting us sort of back on our feet.
And what did you think of your sort of lessons in leadership from up until that moment in time? Because was your first captain Chris Grant, or?
Yep. No, Scotty Wind.
Scotty Wind.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's been my that's my style in everything, is to be a bit like a magpie building a nest of a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, a bit of that, and put it together and sort of make it something your own. But I remember I'm not so good at the nifty leadership catchphrases, or what sort of authentic or agile or whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how to sort of whip it into a nice little paragraph for you, but it was definitely around being myself and having so I suppose it's authenticity, but an emotional honesty.
Yeah,
that's what I sort of wanted to bring to it. And a lot of the mistakes I made in the 14 years previous, they became real diamonds, because you could see certain players or certain situations, I've gone down that path, and you could use that to your advantage.
And so which of your former leaders do you think you modelled yourself on more, or was there any, if not that, was there any former leader that you went to, I can just see why that worked, and I'm so glad I did that? Was there any principles that you maybe brought into play?
There's definitely certain bits. I mean, I love the way that Scotty Wine was I only had him for a year, but he was a storyteller.
Yeah, right.
And he could hold he spoke with a lot of power without ranting and raving. But Luke Darcy was a strong mentor to me, still is, very different to me, but his ability to handle situations with conflict, he was that was something I definitely would refer to a lot.
So what did you do there? What was his sort of thing that stood out, the way he handled that?
Things like just staying calm and getting to the point.
Yeah.
Say what you mean.
Yep.
Get to the point.
Yep.
But it's tone as much as anything, I think.
Yeah. How he went about that. Yep. Perfect.
It's interesting you talk about authenticity and this rawness that of a time that the Bulldogs went through. They're not a team, and just for the listeners, not massively across AFL, but they're not a team that has 80,000 members and so forth. So I don't like to use the term, throw money at it, but a lot of the big clubs could actually do that. They could actually throw money at it and get someone else in and get the best of the best of whatever it is. I think the Bulldogs is one of the few teams that are left with some real, I'm talking real soul, real, backstreet sort of mentality, just real fight. And I've heard your podcast that you did, Bob, talking about 1989 and the merge that nearly happened with the fight back in Fitzroy and Footscray back then. That was just phenomenal to hear those stories. Can talk to us about the heart and soul of that club. Because we talk about culture and stuff like that, which is such an overused sort of terminology at the moment. But what's the heart and soul?
Well, so around the time that Rick came down to the Bulldogs, Peter Rode he organised. Terry Wheeler came and spoke to the players. And for those who don't know, Terry Wheeler's an ex-Bulldogs player and a coach in the early 90s, and he's the best football orator I've ever sort of listened to. Speaks very passionately in his description of the working class roots of the football club. So he spoke to the group about what it means to play for the Bulldogs, and it's one of the great footy speeches I'd ever heard. But it was about the working class roots and the fact that the Bulldogs are outsiders. Footscray, like geographically, we're outsiders. You have to cross the Maribyrnong to come to us. And he talks about all the blacksmiths on the muddy banks, that like all that, which I love all that stuff. I'm a sucker for that kind of language and description. But he made it. It was a deeper sense of what it meant to wear the jumper, more than just the jumper or the team. It was about the place and the working class roots and why we're different to everyone else. And I think the best stuff in team sport is when you feel like it's you against the rest of the world.
Yep.
And you're always trying to create that in some way. And I thought, and Terry Wheeler just articulated that in a way that appealed to me. And so the first thing I did when I became captain was got Terry to come back and deliver that same speech to this young group of players to kind of, inspire them, but to give them a bit of context. Because at that point, when the situation, the captain's gone, the coach is gone, the CEO's gone, when you're a laughing stock, in some ways people sort of, that must have been a difficult period. And in one sense it was, but in another sense that was much easier to lead at that point because it simplified everything. Because it actually wasn't about winning games or the pressure of top four or how's this. It was about getting dignity back and having people feel good about wearing the jumper and feel proud about the club they play for. Because at that time, this group had been kicked and bruised, and losing seasons, 4 losing seasons in a row takes its toll on everyone. So when I became captain, to get Terry Wheeler to come back in and speak about that sort of thing, it just sort of simplified things.
And the best leaders are the best storytellers, we know that, and they're obviously very good at taking complex messages and making them very simple. We've heard that so often on these particular episodes over the last 2 seasons, Pete. And I think out of that adversity comes 2 things. Number one, an opportunity to simplify, as you just articulated there, Bob. But the second thing is, then you got a clean slate, and in comes a coach who probably was the right man for the moment, typically in terms of Bevo. Do you want to talk about that? He's a different character, which might have matched your different leadership style.
Yeah, I think it was a
define different. Yeah.
It's difficult to describe anyone in a paragraph.
Yeah.
But particularly with Luke, as soon as I start to describe him in one way, that he's a romantic, a storyteller, affectionate. As soon as you start to describe him that way, there's a nagging thought of, but he's also process driven and
right.
Wow.
And he's, so I describe he's zen, but he's not a wimp.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? There's a real balance to him.
Well rounded.
Yeah, he is, and there's I think he just balances the sophistication of modern footy and the tactics and all of that with the matters of what I would describe as matters of the football heart. He balances those things.
It's great to hear that, because I was mentioning, I'm not sure if it was on our last podcast or the one before, I was talking about, it was Nick Del Santo was talking about what he'd like to see in the new St Kilda coach. This was pre-Ratton getting appointed. Yeah. And he said, he was talking about the warm and fuzzy coach, put your arms around Luke Beveridge style coach. And that's what instantly people think about Luke Beveridge is they think that. But I think it's just music to my ears to hear how the process driven and all that sort of stuff. And I'd love to tap into that a bit more. But he was talking about St Kilda needing someone who actually was firm and put down the... But then you get someone like a Schwatto who was on here and spoke about Dennis Pagan and the years in the 90s and so forth and what Dennis Pagan was like. And what's right, what's wrong? I mean, is it about the players? Is it you need to adapt?
My thing with this is, and I think we particularly with coaches, we describe them almost in a cartoonish way that there's the hugger or there's the screamer, the yeller, or it's the carrot and the stick. It's like, you can be both.
Yeah.
You can support someone and then ask them to give more. I don't adhere to this thing of it's got to be that or that. Right. It's like it's always a balance. It's a push and pull of does the group need a hug or a shove? That's what I was constantly in that mode of. And I think the best coaches do have the ability to play both.
Well, Nathan Buckley was saying that the best coaches in our interview, going back to the start of the year, actually, and it'd be interesting to get him on now based on just what's happened over the last 48 hours. But he talked about the fact that the best coaches give the environment that allows the people to be the best they can be, whatever that looks like, and not all of them are going to be served by the spray, and not all of them are going to love the hug. There's going to be certain requirements for each particular individual player. He said as long as the collective environment where everyone understands what the goal is and everyone understands what our game plan is, but then within that, how he connects with each individual player is really what he sees as the art of coaching in 2019. Just that ability to have the right conversations. Would that be something that you saw with Bevo?
Yeah, and if I've got a bit of a frustration of those years for the Bulldogs of it was the emotional, we're hugging. People were sort of like, gee, there's so much hugging going on at the Bulldogs, and very affectionate. And I was saying yes, but this wasn't kumbaya. This wasn't the Brady Bunch. We would refer to each other. We would call each other family. It was a brotherhood, and we were family. But family, in that sense, is there's a lot of love, but there's also a lot of arguing around the kitchen table. So yes, there was affection and warmth, but it wasn't just all fluffy.
Yeah,
it was you had that affection for one another, so that then when it came a time to have a disagreement or have robust feedback, as they call it, you can do that.
Yeah. So how did you deliver that? So you saw something in review about a player that needed to have a stern talking to, and the coaches have laid it on the leadership group to go have that sort of. Not intervention, but they've said, go sort this player out based on what we saw there, or some behavioural thing that went outside the vision or the values. How did you have that conversation?
I would try and make it not casual is not the right word, but hey, can I grab you for a chat?
Yep.
And in a footy club with young men, that kind of is that sets the mood. It sets the mood. Yeah. And you grab just put your hand on a player's arm and hey, can I grab you for a chat? And often I would take a player for a walk around the oval. Come on, let's go for a walk. And even that I found helpful, that players could have a better conversation when you were walking together instead of just sat there, face off, where that would you could see players tighten up and they're on guard of and maybe they'd give you the answer they thought you wanted to hear. Whereas you go for a walk,
it's a chat.
Hey, come on, mate, let's go and have a chat.
Yeah.
And things would you'd have a real conversation and feel like you got somewhere by the end of it.
And again, without wanting to paraphrase Nathan Buckley, he talks about the fact that as a coach, if he's just talking to a player across his desk, it's almost like the school principal talking to a little school kid, where it's like, hey, mate, can we go for a walk? And he'll do that too. He'll go for a walk either around the oval or around the tan, and just he finds that the barriers are down, there's more chance for feedback to get through, and there's better returns on that sort of investment to it. And obviously it worked for Bob Pete, because in 2015, when he put his hand up, and he was coming towards the end of his career, and at that stage there was even thought that you might not even go on yourself, but you sort of, I remember the conversation we had, which is, mate, here's what's happened, and he started giving me the lie of the landscape, and he said, look, I really think I'm sort of compelled to step up here. I said, based on that, if I'm hearing that, I'm hearing almost you could retire. And he goes, no, you're not listening to me. And I said, no, I'm hearing everything you're saying, but if you just said to me, I want to come back because I think there's still some things I can bring to the table, there's still some gifts I can give to the team, I still think I could be a better player. I'm saying, well, if I'm hearing that, then this should all, the reason for coming back in 2015 should be, I want to be All-Australian, I want to be an All-Australian captain, and that's exactly what happened in 2015. Second time All-Australian, I think, in 2015, and first time as All-Australian captain.
All-Australian captain 2015, and the AFLPA, which arguably a lot of the players would see that as the number one sort of award chosen by your peers and people you play against in terms of the Captain of the Year as well in 2015. That was a monumental turnaround in a season from erring on the side of giving it all away or whatever it may be, all those thoughts that go through, to just coming out with just something that was just really extraordinary.
Yeah, it's a special time when you catch the competition off guard, and every year there's one side that sort of just goes, just slingshots past.
Brisbane Lions, thank you, Sammy Harper.
That's right. And
again, Sammy, we're sorry.
And when it's happening, it's an exhilarating ride.
Yep.
So you go from being irrelevant and just there's a
cliche.
Ignored.
Yep.
Basically, the football world, as we call it, sort of turns its back on you, and a bit of a laughing stock, to then discover that you're actually a damn good footy side was a massive thrill. And so I remember there was a lot of special moments and important milestones, but that round 5 in that year we went up to Sydney, and we'd won a few early games and we were going okay. But we're still a side that didn't know who it was yet. Not sure. Got this new coach. He's a different thinker, but he's lifting our horizons a bit. And he's got an enormous belief in himself, but he's also telling us that we could be much more than we think we are. So there was something happening, and then we beat Sydney in the wet up there, and we go into the rooms. It's a classic win. It's one of the great days in footy I've ever had, and we go in and sing the song, and the song is heaving. It's because it's got all this emotion in it, because the world is changing. We've been bruised and kicked for 4 years, and all of a sudden things are changing. And then we go into the coach's meeting room, and the coach doesn't say anything for 2 minutes, and we're sitting there waiting, and then he hops up and through tears in his eyes says, "I'm proud of you." And that was different. That was different. That was not my experience of league footy at that point, and that there's a lot of.
And bear in mind that was 15 years of league footy too.
That's right, yeah. And so I think at its very basic level, making the coach proud is a pretty pure aspect of the game, I think.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. 2016, this is grand final week, so
we're fast forward.
We're actually I'm going to fast forward straight away. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to go.
When did we know?
I'm going to talk about adversity first.
Yeah, okay.
I want to go back to adversity, because the first major bit of adversity that from an outsider sort of point of view, there probably would have been some of the stuff go on, was in 2006. That's when you first did your knee.
Yeah.
That left knee in a horrible collision. Talk us through those, and I want to sort of tap into the little bits of adversities through your career then, because then you came back in 2007, and then 2008 you did it again. That was a different knee.
Different knee. Sort of injury.
Talk to us about the mindset around those times in your career when.
It's one of those things of at the time it feels like it's a major setback, because the game is taken away from you. But it's that classic thing of it actually becomes one of the great moments, really, because it makes you appreciate things. So, as I said, I had a charmed sort of run through life. I was young, I was playing footy and having a great time, and then you do your knee and it's taken away from you, and all of a sudden you move to the side. So natural ability is kind of gone. So then it's about becoming a really hardened professional, and that's what that knee injury gave me. It transformed me into a professional footballer, whereas before I was just getting by. Which, there's a tinge of regret there, but I think that's just, we're all on our sort of path.
So you do the work, you come back,
yeah,
and then you do it all again.
Yeah,
you hit again.
Yeah, so it was a different
sort of.
So the reconstruction is one of those, without getting bogged down in the detail. It's tough because it's just time. But you actually progress. Once you can jog, you can jog. Once you can run, you can run. Once you can jump, you just sort of tick things off. But it just takes 10 months to get back to playing. So that's the tough bit. But the patella tendon injury in 2008 was much more difficult because it was affecting performance. You could play, but you'd be sore and you couldn't turn, you couldn't jump off that leg, so you'd go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that created a lot of anxiety and anguish. So yeah, that was a really difficult period. That sort of 2009, 2008.
Then came back 2011. Were you All Australian 2011?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So you came back bigger and better than ever.
Yeah.
Which is real credit too.
Yeah, it was like I was sort of determined to hang in there, and there's that burning, to fulfill potential. I think, that whatever it is inside of you, you kind of know that you've got it in you, and that's part of the athlete, I think, brain of just pushing and pushing and pushing to exhaust whatever you've got inside you.
Yeah.
So would you say those knee ops were when you probably transitioned from being an interested, participant to a really committed AFL footballer?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just that it really made me appreciate what it meant to me, because having it taken away, was kind of gut wrenching.
So let's do fast forward to the point where we're showing a bit of promise. Let's fast forward to 2016, and we're going
10th
well.
of April.
And again, you cop another sort of challenge with your knee, so you're out.
Literally in the final minutes of that game.
That was against Hawthorn, was it?
Against Hawks, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was.
Sorry to sort of take you.
No. That's what it's all about. So it was. The timing is interesting, and and as a writer, I find the timing really interesting. Of the cause was okay. I'll try and get this team back on, and once the ship has turned, that was kind of the phrase that we kept talking about. Once the ship has turned, and round 3, 2016, the Bulldogs are in the top of the table, match of the round against one of the greatest teams, maybe the greatest team of all time, Hawthorn, and we're up with a couple of minutes to go, and then it happens. Twist, bang, knees gone, and I instantly know that's it. And and in that moment, it's like, okay, that's game gone, season gone, career over, no premiership, all in the space of a couple of seconds. It's kind of a lot to take in. It's a lot to handle on one day.
There's a lot to take in for the supporters as well, and for those that are close to you, because it's not it affects you bigger than anyone, but it certainly affected a lot of people around you. Yeah, family, friends.
Yeah, they're they're in it with you, and the game demands a lot physically and emotionally, and you are all in, the people around you, they're all in with you. So. When something like that happens, it's the context is important. That Gerard Whateley describes sport as the dessert trolley of life. So it needs that context. But when an injury like that happens, it feels like grief. It does feel like, it's very, very raw.
So you console with Justine and the kids, and so we're thinking, okay, that's probably it now. And then what stage do you remember having the conversation with Juzzy that I'm injured, I'm out, we're going okay. This could actually be a fairy tale run for the Bulldogs, and I'm not going to be a part of it.
I remember that the boys beat Port Adelaide in Adelaide. It was the middle of the year, I think maybe around 13 or... And I remember I came home and sat on the couch and said to Justine, I said, I think we're going to win it. I think this group, I just felt it. I just had been around footy long enough and immediately started to brace myself for, okay, so if this is what happens, I know how this plays out, that, grand final week, there's always there's got to be the sad story.
Yeah. There's two things in grand final week. There's the hyperbaric chamber story.
Yeah, there's the hyperbaric, yeah.
And there's the unluckiest story of the year, and you knew you were going to be the latter part of that. Yeah.
And so I describe it as, so grand final week is a, for the teams, they're like a cheeseburger, and there's the delicious, fatty goodness of the burger and the cheese, and it's all just great. But you need something a bit bitter just to balance it out, and that's the gherkin. And every year there's a gherkin, and I was
a VB then.
Yeah. So I was the gherkin,
special sauce.
And this year, then it's grand final week this week, and there's a few gherkins. There's, I think my heart's breaking for Cal Ward at the moment. Stephen Cornelio, if he doesn't play,
Brett
Delidio is just there's that's another level of cruelty.
Yep.
That's how the game rolls.
Yeah, it is. And so you know that you're going to be the focus. You've got two options here. No matter which way you go, you're not going to win the popularity debate. So if you sook in the corner, you're the sookie captain.
Yeah.
If you give everything you've got and be the best leader, then somehow you're raining on the parade.
Yeah. There's you sort of go in knowing that you can't quite get it right, whichever line you pick. But my kind of rationale with the whole week was I can live without being a premiership player. It'll be difficult, and I'll have to go through some tough times with that. But I can't live with being an emotional anchor for the group and cost them and have them weighed down by the sook in the corner. So the players knew I was going through a difficult time, but I was determined to not bring that to them. That was, that really, I would want to stress that point of, a halfback flanker's lot is, it's a drop in the ocean. This is a footy club that over 100 years old that had a 62-year premiership drought. This was a big deal, and I was determined to not be an anchor.
So what was your role after you did the knee? Obviously there's a leadership role there and so forth, but if you were to sort of talk about it in a paragraph, what role did you play? Was it as the right hand man to Luke Beveridge? Was it just purely as a leadership group participant, or how would you describe your role?
I'm not sure how I'd describe it, but the leadership role, as I understood it, was you are stuck in the middle. So your job is to support the coach's message down. So his message, what he's trying to do down, but it's probably outweighed by you're representing the players and what they need up towards the coaches. Yeah. So you're the one in the middle of representing the players to the coach and also the coach down. So there was always that balance. So not playing, it does take out a big chunk of leadership, because there's nothing quite like going to battle with the guys but it was that facilitator and having conversations and talk. It was just talking to people and trying your best to help.
And so on game day,
can we actually just go back, just before game day, because it was interesting. I was just wanted to take. I love looking at past stats and so forth like that. So they finished 14th in 2015, and then up they go. But the reality is, you finished 7th. Like, for you to have that, you just said then about that Port Adelaide game, and you felt this is your year. It wasn't like you were flying and you were 2 games clear on top or whatever.
But the 7th is a little bit misleading though. That we won 15 games.
Yep.
Which is a lot. So 7th was a bit unders for us, really.
Yep.
We were a better side than 7th.
Because historically, what would that have been? 10, 11 wins, maybe 12.
12 sort of sneak in,
that's
so
true.
15 is quite a lot.
Yep. But you still had to go to Perth, though.
Yeah, that's and there was a lot
Road
of
trips.
there was a lot of guys were injured and
Yeah.
they brought 5 players back in and then went over to West Coast. But yeah, there was just a lot of unusual things. The outside world didn't give us a chance, and we expected to win.
Now, I don't want to sound like Mark Robinson here, but was it an us against them, Bob? Did you feel that, or what was it?
That's really good.
We kind of had harnessed that for that whole period.
Yeah.
That it was us against the world, that we'd been sort of written off. And actually, I think it was Dennis Cometti, at the end of 2014 had referred to us as jabronis. That jabroni in the wrestling, it's the guy who goes in and but he just gets beaten. He's there to fill a role. But
the Washington Capitals against the
and we kind of used that.
Yep.
Of okay, well that's how the world thinks of us. So you're pushing back on that and trying to prove a point.
Yeah. We're not the sparring partner.
Yeah.
We deserve the title.
And there's nothing really kind of magnifies that more than playing interstate.
Yep.
When it's just a gang.
We had
You
2
go
great
over
ones, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Perth and then GWS. That
GWS in that prelim. You came from nowhere.
Yeah.
You came from nowhere. You were 10 lengths back, and then it was just quite phenomenal. And that really then kicked off one of the most exciting sort of weeks, no doubt, but one of the toughest weeks for you as well. And it's great to sort of get your insight into it, because a lot of us only dream about what it could possibly be. And as supporters, it's such a monumental time of your life, that particular week. But to the emotional roller coaster must have been quite.
Oh yeah, no, it was pretty. It was pretty intense. So there was, I mean, at the role of the club was kind of like an emotional sort of life raft. You sort of cling onto that, and at least it gave me something to do and distract from the fact that inside, your heart's breaking because we're footballers, simple souls, and it was a sense of displacement. That's how I would describe that. I was not where I was meant to be. That's how it felt. But as I've already said, I would not bring that to the football club in front of the players. It was I had try and keep them and keep the vibe up. But at home it was like tears on the couch and being sort of nursed by my wife. It was a pretty traumatic week.
And there was some wonderful vision of you being dropped off virtually at the door of the change rooms by Justine and your beautiful daughter Frankie gives you a hug and you've given her a kiss, and then she's got your jumper on with the whole sort of standpoint. And it was one of those moments where I'll be honest, Pete, I sort of looked at that and I thought, he deserves better than this. But life isn't just a fairy tale. How would we know what really great opportunities are if we didn't know what real big challenges were? And I knew you'd sort of gone through that to a degree. So where did you watch the game? I was
in the coach's box.
Yep.
Yep. Sort of sat next to Chris Grant, behind Chris Grant, next to John Schultz. It's kind of like a Footscray fantasy camp. So great view of the game. It was I spent, to be fair though, I watched probably half the game, and the other half I watched the ceiling because it was just too much to bear.
Yeah.
To watch, but I was incredibly proud of that. That team was such a special bunch of boys.
How would you describe Luke in the box? What's a coach like on a day like that? It's just there's no tomorrow. This is it.
You know what? I've got stronger memories of the preliminary final, of the intensity and the emotion, and was heaving in that stadium that night. And the closer it got towards the end, people were getting frantic. And what I noticed with Luke is when things get frantic in that atmosphere, he gets calm. He has the ability to slow down and to slow other people down, to say, settle down. What are we doing? To think methodically. And so that's where it's this
Zen.
Yeah, like as for someone as emotional as he is, he's not erratic. And I think that's what you can be emotional, but also have that that cool hand in a crisis.
So the siren goes, it's done, we win, drought's over. Talk us through those emotions.
Well, it's so there's no bigger Bulldog supporter than I am. So the pride and euphoria is real, and it's very real. But my I guess my euphoria had warts on it.
Yeah.
Compared to the players who are on the ground, they'd reach a state of football nirvana. Like it doesn't get any better than that. And so there was a tightness in my smile, is how I would sort of describe it.
Yep. And Eastonwood is he's over the top coming to find you to make sure that you were aware of the impact you'd had.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. There was a lot of hugging. There was a lot of screaming. There was a lot of. It was that's what the moment deserved. There's 62 years of drought. There's a lot of pain in those years.
Just to set the scene, Pete, as you will introduce the moment that you class as one of the greatest emotional moments you've witnessed in your time following sport, which I think is amazing. But you're with all the players and the moment's reality now, and you're hugging with everybody, and it's all exciting, and the presentations are happening in relation to the players who have played the game, and you're sort of, obviously, as you say, just sort of smiling through gritted teeth at the moment, thinking that could have, what might have been, blah, 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 and then the moment comes, Pete.
Did you know what was about to happen? Was it ever spoken about? Or
No, I didn't. I mean, I kind of... I kind of knew something that would get a photo or something. I don't know, but no, it was a surreal day, and in that, like the energy in that stadium was like nothing I'd ever felt before. So it wasn't sort of conscious, rational thinking. It was all like a bit of a dream-like state. Everyone was sort of. And then the coach, did what he did. And people ask me about it, but it's really not about me. It's about it probably speaks more about the coach than anything, and the spirit of that team.
It's quite humbling.
Yeah. What kind of gives me a bit of peace with it? What people don't really understand is that it's not about the medal. The medal is arbitrary. It's about the affection and the warmth and the love that the team had and the club had at that time. But in my own mind, what gives me a sense of peace is it's the medal for the 23rd man. So it's for Todd Curley, it's for Luke Darcy, it's for Matthew Croft, it's for all the guys who played and dragged the footy club through the tough years and that didn't get to play. That's what sort of gives me a sense
Benny
of peace.
Harrison, let's get him in there.
Yeah, that's right. Harrow in there.
I've got to admit, it was a really interesting feeling as an outsider to see it.
But let's just give some context for those who don't know what we're talking about.
So Luke Beveridge gets the coach's medal on the dais, and calls Bob Murphy up, and then takes his medal off and puts it on. This is for you, Bob, and puts it around Bob, which was just phenomenal. And I could. And it's interesting. A lot of people would have had some really different sort of emotions about that. It's like, Luke, this is, why are you giving up your medal and all that sort of stuff? But it's not about that. And I love to hear that. And it's about, you look at what you've done for the club, not just in a season, but for many, many seasons. And you're as much a part of it as anyone. And it was fantastic and applaudable that Luke actually did that so many would have wanted to do as well, is to recognise a great Bulldogs man and the ultimate captain of the club.
That was his words. His exact words were, "You're a part of this, a bigger part of this as anybody." As he handed you the medal.
The thing about it, why I describe the medal as being arbitrary, is that it's misunderstood that moment by some people that it was. That I'm a premiership player, or that I thought I was because I got them. It's like, no, you bonehead. Like,
that's why I brought it up. I'm tapping into. I know that would have been a thought for sure.
No, it's the line of premiership players in it is very clear. I am not a premiership player.
And you're okay with that?
Well, I've got to be.
But you look at Luke gave you his medal, like Easton Wood or one of the guys didn't give you their medal. So it was.
for your
It was
leadership.
from the leadership and coach. I tell you what, there should be a Bob Murphy medal that gets given out to
Jesus,
to people behind the
please.
scenes. So just an idea, just an idea.
Please. No, I'm not
But it
going
was-
to.
it's
No,
the
I
Herb-
can't.
it's
I'm not
the-
going to champion that
It's
one.
the Herb Elliott, John Landy moment, mate, of AFL. We're going to get that movement up. Let's get that up.
Let's get
we
it
want
up.
a Bob medal.
Oh,
and
geez,
we want all
please
of our
don't.
subscribers
Please
to
don't.
For
talk
the,
about that.
but Bob, it's like seriously, that as I said from the outset, it was one of the most gracious and just heartwarming, heartfelt moments ever on a sporting arena that I have seen. And the more you think about it, the more the hairs on my neck stand up as a kangaroo supporter. But to see that, and just as a beautiful human that you are, and you've given so much to the game, and you continue to give so much to the game, and it was just one of those things you look back on. What a special moment! It just makes it even better, doesn't it? When you think back at that time, you think, well, does it get any better than that? What this game's really all about?
Which probably brings us to our final topic, Pete, about the key ball warriors that went gangbusters after that moment, and the way that sort of people now all of a sudden believe that their opinions got weight. So let's just not put our identity to it, but we'll just type some stupid stuff on social media. I can remember exactly where I was because I was with my beautiful wife, Gay, who loves Bob, as you can appreciate, Pete. And we were in Queensland. I was speaking at a conference up at the Star up there, and he rings me and he says, "Man, I want to just share it with you before you hear it from anybody else. I'm done. It's just I'm spent. I've got nothing left to give." And Gay just said, for a guy who just loves the game seems to have just absolutely worn him out. And I said, well, that's kind of what I was hearing too. So unbeknownst to Bob at the time, we were driving along in the car when he was telling me about it, and I remember just thinking in my time, and when I first met him, he was just this guy who just loved the game, just couldn't wait to play. A bit like Sammy Harper when we interviewed him this year about this young 21-year-old kid who loves playing cricket. And and then Bob, just talk us through that as a way of wrapping it up. Footy nowadays has begun, from your time, it was always professional potentially, but it might have been semi-professional compared to where it is today. Yeah. What are the sort of insights you can give around that, and more importantly, the lessons we can give to not make this thing bigger than life itself, but yet seemingly have enough currency on it and get that enough fuel to get the rocket off the pad without blowing the whole thing up? What do you think is the impact there that you could share?
Geez, is there a question in there?
Yeah, I know, it's a long way. I was Tony Shaw, 3AW. I'm asking a question I'm going to answer myself.
That's all we've got time for today.
Thank you for everyone for joining us.
The game sort of spat me out by the end. I was physically and emotionally just shot. I'd got there, but that was I get a sense of peace from that. It's like I got to the end.
Yeah,
we'd given it everything. So there's a sense of peace there of like, I know I've got nothing left. I don't have a hard time watching now. I don't miss it that much. There's a hole there of not being a premiership player, as we've discussed. But I'm content that I kind of gave it everything I had. But it's you're getting all you can handle as a league footballer. It's a lot to handle.
You put that down to the press sort of being such a like if you think of when you first started.
I just think it's the being the constant critiquing and being judged. That's all eyes on. And I think if you ask players now, they talk about the media. The media, but it's not just that. No. The media. It's the internal pressure. Everything's reviewed, everything's rewound, everything's played again. The social media aspect of the game, and everyone's got an opinion now. And you hear those opinions, and I kind of do worry for the players and the ones coming into the game of how they can handle that.
Yeah, and so are you conscious of that now as in your current role? So you are a football expert, so you've got to make comments. And I always struggle when I hear experts sort of question the person as opposed to the bit of play and their questioning.
Well, I think that one of the tough things for athletes, but particularly footballers, is that when mistakes or there's shortcomings, it's linked to very emotional language. So someone takes their eye off the ball, well, they're a coward.
Yeah.
If you're fatigued and you can't chase, well, you're selfish. So there's, and that's players take it to heart.
Yeah,
that side of the game.
Yeah, and the thing I've observed, Pete, and I think we've chatted about this in the past too, I'm seeing commentators and experts today not so much commentating the game, they're commentating to what their opinion was before the game.
They barrack for the opinion.
Yeah, to make sure that they're staying consistent with who they are because they're being paid to be an expert. And if I think about it, the two sides that are playing off in the grand final this year in 2019, by all the so-called experts, well, Richmond can't win it because they've lost, Rance for the year, and they were at times without Cochin and Martin, so they're no good. And Greater Western Sydney Giants, well, their style of football won't stack up in the big games, and they've got too many injuries as well. And yet they're the two teams that are playing off. So now everybody's opinion way back at the start of the year is out.
I just have a hard time, and probably because the Luke Beveridge years, let's call it those, had the greatest impact on my life, and that was, the outsider. So I have a hard time with certainty in football. People going, this will definitely happen, that cannot happen.
Yeah.
I think, you know what? It's an oval ball, and this game is chaotic, and this is human beings who are up and down and left and right, and so. Yeah.
Well, the certainty is the uncertainty, isn't it? Ark told us that on Saturday. That
Thanks, Pete. Not go back there, please.
We could be blatantly obvious, but it is the game. It is the world we live in. So, Bob, you're doing a tremendous job in the media now, as Rick said, with Gerald Waitley on SEN.
Now Andy Marr Drive.
And Andy Marr Drive. But talk to us a little bit about Leather Soul, your first book.
Yep.
You put
second book.
Second book.
Well, I
Captain's Diary.
Captain's Diary. Let's go with Leather Soul. Tell us a little bit of a plug for that book.
Well, I'd always wanted to write a book because I thought there was a bit of a gap. I don't think a footballer's ever written it himself, and generally the footballer books are from the superstar and the ones who've climbed the mountain and win the day, and then there's the. So I always felt like there was room for a book of a footballer who was from the middle of the pack, and so that's what I sort of set my mind to doing that. And if anyone who's written a book, it's different. It takes a lot, takes a lot out of you, and I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't be rushing out to write a second memoir. So it's kind of.
And the story from your book launch, which I think would be a good one if you could be prepared to share it, about what your beautiful wife Justine had to say when you had to, on 3, shout out a word.
Oh, yeah. So I said, let's do a bit of like a quick fire sort of peer feedback. And I said, let's describe each other in one word at the same time. She was like, yep, no worries. 3, 2, 1. And I said, honest. And she said, lazy. And... if you think about that, that's kind of checkmate. Yeah. So I've gone honest. So I've said she's honest. So I can't really argue the toss on lazy. So,
and then Bob says, "You do realise, darling, that I wrote a book for you. Like I dedicated a book to you. Like that's just the funniest.
Just to prove, just to sort of get a better rating than lazy."
And I don't want to finish without sort of talking a little bit about you as the dad. 3 beautiful kids. Yeah. As a father, what do you see your role there? You've got a son, so as a father-son, is that what you're looking for there?
No, not at all.
Not unless there's pellets. What do you do when you're into dinosaurs, mate?
I don't know. What's that?
Archaeological bloody something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. This is probably the wrong answer, but I just don't think of it in terms of what my role is. It just, I love my kids and I love being around them and I want good things for them, but I don't kind of think about it in terms of sort of, too sort of, highbrow.
Yeah, and so what fills your cup other than walking the dog and all the sort of fun domestic duties that radio gives you the opportunity to do now, especially because your drive is the afternoon time slot. So
I get to walk the kids to school every day, and we just get to hang out and chat, and I'm at my happiest when I'm at home, dogs asleep, kids on the couch, watching TV, a glass of wine. That's me.
And
I'm happy.
And Frankie and Delilah are the most inquisitive kids. Like they'll ask him real deep and meaningful questions. And Jarvis is just happy playing with stuff. Very, very much like Bob. Very kinesthetic, sort of touchy feely kind of kid. It's quite funny. So from that standpoint, I think that's the way I see you. Just being able to be their best. Quality time and quantity time are sort of two cues that you sort of really take from your kids. I think
exactly.
So, Bob, what do you see, just in closing, what do you see as the biggest challenges it's in society, particularly in the sporting sort of framework? What do you see as the biggest challenges for athletes moving forward?
I think it would be what I sort of alluded to before of the dealing with the judgment, and I had this this theory of. When I started my career, you can tell a lot by the noise of the crowd. You can tell 50,000 people, they make a noise of frustration, of anger, it's subtle, but you get a sense of how they feel. And if you've had a bad moment on a footy field and you hear the groans of the and then it's gone. But now I think with social media, with athletes. Once you've seen one of those horrible things written about you, or once you've been jabbed with that needle once, then you're bracing for it. So I think the waiting to be hit is worse than the hit, and I think that's what a lot of athletes are dealing with now. Of that really stinging criticism. Once you've had it once, you're on guard. You're on guard, waiting for the next one.
Well. This has been just another stellar episode. Before we do sort of put the microphone on mute, your tip in this uncertain world of an AFL Grand Final, which so many of my friends are saying, thanks for losing, that we're just engraving the cup now. Not mentioning any names to my Richmond supporter friends.
Got a couple of them
so your thoughts on who ultimately wins?
It's hard to go against the Tigers, but the Giants have got something special.
Sense of destiny,
They've got and they have got this, the us against the world.
Norm Smith medalist?
Norm Smith medalist might be Zach Williams.
And Robbo and Waitley.
That's who they are. That's not a performance piece. That's who they are.
I often talk about it. I say to Bob, he goes, mate, the number one question I get asked is, what's Robbo like? And what you're seeing is what you get. Yeah. That's who he is. That's how he rock and roll.
It's interesting that I remember last year after that grand final, let's not go back there, sorry, Rick, but Cleveland West Coast, and they closed down Swan Street, and then I think it was meant to be closed till about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they opened it at about 8 p.m. I wonder if that could happen. I think Swan Street will be closed. The Tigers lose. I think Swan Street will be open pretty quickly after that.
And your thoughts?
Tigers by 20.
And Norm Smith medalist?
I'm... I haven't really thought about the Norm Smith medalist, but I'm going to go with Basher Hooley, actually.
Oh, good for you. No, my view, for what it's worth, is I think the Tigers are just... They are phenomenal to get over what they've got over this year. The thought was they were probably lucky to win in 2017, and because they lost the prelim in 2018, everyone thought, they were lucky to win. And then as soon as they lose one because they had a great run with injuries, they just didn't have injuries for 2.5 seasons.
What was really funny, Bob, sorry to break in there, Rick, but we interviewed Voice of Value Peter Burge.
Yeah, who's there?
Head peak performance coach and so forth, and pretty much straight after that there was injury. We're like, oh no, what have we done? We've cursed them.
Even he said that too. He said we're in all sorts of trouble, but you know what, it just gives an opportunity to somebody else. He was upbeat. But no, my view is Richmond, for what they've gone through and who they are, and they're very focused on what they believe they can do and what they believe they can achieve. And I think if they win, you know that Dusty's going to play well. So I would think it's a bit like picking Mystic Journey in the races or Winks in the races, I should say, more importantly. So, Bob, on behalf of all of our subscribers, all of our listeners, you've been so generous with your time. This is a bit of have to go with some old warts and some challenging times, but for the majority,
it's free therapy for me.
Free therapy for you. But I've been really, really fortunate to have you as someone in my life for the better part of 2 decades. You've been just an absolute delight to have as a friend. You launched my book. I've been to your book launches. It's to see him with his wife and family, Pete, is where you see the real Bob. But to see him with anybody who's got a caring heart, heart. He wants to give. The fact that he was so easy to get this time of the year when, realistically he shouldn't be easy to get because his media profile and this time of the year requires him to be on TV and radio, but he was happy to sort of make this time with us. Is something we don't take lightly or for granted, mate. It's been magnificent to have you here.
Absolute pleasure.
And for those of you who are listening and or watching, please make sure that you do look into Leather Soul. It's available in all good bookstores, probably crap ones as well by now. Bob's probably got a few boxes in his garage that you can help us out with if you get stuck. But
there's plenty left.
In all seriousness, please do rate the information that we've shared, and if you like it, please make sure that you share it with your networks. And we're trying to get this particular interview out to as many people as we can, not just to those AFL centrics. There's a lot to learn from the northern states and or Australia, New Zealand, and wherever we go. To our good friend Paul McGee in the UK, keeps on blasting it out. We thank you for your support. And again, like always, we'll really appreciate any feedback you can give us and any sort of rating you can give. On behalf of everyone at Voices of Value, we say thank you to Bob Murphy, absolute AFL royalty, as Pete introduced him, and we look forward to your feedback on this wonderful episode.
Thanks, Bob.
Good on you guys.
We trust you enjoyed listening to Voices of Value, a shared conversation between Rick Rushton, Peter Kakos, and their valued guests. Their views are not necessarily those of the wider world, but they should be. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or your preferred podcast source, and we love to hear both your feedback and ratings on the content we provide. Additional information can be sourced through our website, voicesofvaluepodcast.com. Join the conversation again next week when Peter and Rick continue the search for truth, justice, and the value-added way.